Ambassador Jonathan Hayes had attended diplomatic receptions on 43 different worlds, but none had prepared him for the sheer grandeur of the Valdorian Imperial Palace on Lyrilleth Prime. Crystal spires stretched toward the binary sunset, their surfaces alive with patterns of light that responded to the emotional resonance of the beings within. The great hall where tonight's reception was being held could have housed a small city, its vaulted ceilings decorated with living murals that shifted and flowed like liquid starlight. "Impressive, isn't it?" said Ambassador Chen, the senior human diplomat who had been navigating Valdorian politics for the better part of a decade. "They say the entire palace is grown rather than built, a single living crystal organism that's been shaped over millennia." Jonathan nodded, though his attention was focused on the political implications rather than the architectural marvels. Tonight's reception was meant to set the stage for formal peace negotiations between Earth and the Valdorian Empire, ending nearly 50 years of Cold War tensions that had kept both civilizations on the brink of conflict. "Any last-minute advice about protocol?" he asked, adjusting his formal diplomatic attire. "With the Valdorians, respect for hierarchy is everything. Princess Saralyn is not just heir to the throne, she's considered semi-divine by their people. Address her as, Your Imperial Highness, don't make direct eye contact unless she initiates it, and whatever you do, don't mention their psychic abilities unless she brings it up first." Jonathan had studied the briefings extensively, but meeting one of the galaxy's most powerful beings in person was different from reading about them. The Valdorians were an ancient species, their silver-skinned, 7-foot frames marking them as natural rulers who had dominated this region of space for thousands of years. Their psychic capabilities were legendary, though they rarely discussed them with outsiders. Ambassador Hayes, a melodious voice announced his name with perfect pronunciation despite the obvious alien vocal structure. He turned to see a Valdorian court official approaching, elegant, imposing, and radiating the kind of presence that made humans instinctively defer. "High Sage Veltaran," Ambassador Chen said with a respectful bow. "May I present Ambassador Jonathan Hayes, Earth's primary representative for the upcoming negotiations." "The honor is mine," Jonathan said, offering the formal bow he'd practiced countless times. "I look forward to working toward peace between our peoples." High Sage Veltaran studied him with eyes that seemed to look through rather than at him, a disconcerting experience that reminded Jonathan of the Valdorians' reputation for reading minds. "Her Imperial Highness will see you now. Please, follow me." They moved through the reception hall, past clusters of beings from dozens of different species, all here to witness what could be the most significant diplomatic breakthrough in centuries. Jonathan noted the way conversations paused as they passed, the weight of expectation that seemed to follow their small procession. Princess Saralyn stood at the center of the hall's raised dais, surrounded by a carefully orchestrated court that balanced political necessity with artistic beauty. She was everything the briefings had described and more, nearly 7 feet tall, with luminescent silver skin that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Elaborate sapphire markings traced patterns along her arms and throat, indicating her royal bloodline, while her dark hair was woven with threads of actual starlight that caught and reflected the hall's ambient illumination. But it was her bearing that truly marked her as royalty. She stood with the kind of confidence that came from millennia of genetic memory, the certainty of someone born to rule civilizations. When she turned to acknowledge their approach, Jonathan felt the full weight of her attention, intelligent, powerful, and utterly alien despite the humanoid features they shared. "Your Imperial Highness," High Sage Veltaran announced, "I present Ambassador Jonathan Hayes of Earth." Jonathan executed his formal bow with practiced precision, maintaining the proper distance and duration that protocol required. "Your Imperial Highness, it is an honor to represent my people in these historic negotiations." "Ambassador Hayes," Princess Saralyn replied, her voice carrying the musical quality that made all Valdorian speech sound like controlled song. "Welcome to Lyrilleth Prime. We hope your stay will be both comfortable and productive." The exchange was perfectly routine. Polite, formal, and designed to establish proper diplomatic relationships without overstepping cultural boundaries. Jonathan had navigated hundreds of similar introductions, and this one seemed to be proceeding exactly as expected. "Earth looks forward to building a lasting peace with the Valdorian Empire," he said, maintaining the careful balance between confidence and deference that effective diplomacy required. We believe our civilizations have much to offer each other. Indeed, Princess Saralyn agreed, her tone suggesting polite interest rather than genuine enthusiasm. The potential for mutual benefit appears significant. She was looking past him as she spoke, her attention partially focused on other guests who required acknowledgement, other diplomatic necessities that demanded her time. Jonathan was about to deliver the closing pleasantries that would allow him to withdraw when Princess Saralyn's gaze returned to his face, making direct eye contact for the first time in their conversation. The effect was immediate and electric. Her confident expression wavered, replaced by something between confusion and recognition. Her luminescent skin seemed to pale, the sapphire markings along her throat flickering like disrupted circuitry. For several heartbeats, she simply stared at him with an intensity that made every other sound in the great hall seem to fade away. Then she took a step backward. "It's you," she whispered, her voice carrying none of the controlled formality of moments before. The words held a certainty that defied logic, a recognition that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than memory. The reaction sent ripples through the assembled court. High Sage Veltaran moved closer to the princess, his expression shifting from diplomatic courtesy to protective concern. Other Valdorian nobles turned their attention toward the unprecedented scene, while human diplomats exchanged glances that mixed alarm with confusion. "Your Highness," Jonathan said carefully, genuinely puzzled by her reaction. "I believe there may be some misunderstanding. We haven't met before." But Princess Saralyn wasn't listening to his words. She was studying his face with the kind of desperate intensity usually reserved for solving life-or-death puzzles, her violet eyes searching for something she clearly believed she should find there. "Your eyes," she said, her voice barely audible. "They're exactly the same." "I'm sorry, Your Highness, I don't understand." High Sage Veltaran, Princess Saralyn interrupted, never breaking eye contact with Jonathan. "Clear the reception area. I need to speak with the ambassador privately." "Your Imperial Highness," the High Sage said carefully, "perhaps it would be better to." "Now," she said, and though her voice remained quiet, it carried the kind of royal authority that ended discussions immediately. The great hall began emptying with remarkable efficiency, beings from dozens of species departing with the kind of speed that suggested they recognized the voice of absolute power when they heard it. Within minutes, only Jonathan, Princess Saralyn, and a handful of essential security personnel remained in the vast space. Jonathan found himself alone with one of the galaxy's most powerful rulers, who was looking at him as if he were a ghost she had been expecting to encounter for her entire life. "Your Imperial Highness," he said quietly, "I think there's been some kind of mistake. I've never been to this system before, never had any contact with Valdorian civilization prior to this mission." Princess Saralyn moved closer, her movements carrying none of the formal restraint that had characterized their public introduction. She reached toward his face as if to touch it, then stopped herself, her hand trembling slightly in the space between them. "No mistake," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of wonder and something that sounded like grief. "I know you. I've always known you. I just never expected to find you again. Find me again." She stepped back once more, wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to maintain physical stability in the face of overwhelming revelation. "Ambassador Hayes," she said, "what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible. But I need you to listen, because if I'm right, if you're who I think you are, then everything about these negotiations, about our species' relationship, about the future itself, is about to change." Jonathan looked around the empty reception hall, at the crystal walls that pulsed with reflected light, at the alien princess who claimed to know him from an encounter that had never happened. Every instinct told him he was dealing with either mistaken identity or some form of psychological breakdown. But something deeper, something he couldn't name or explain, whispered that Princess Saralyn was telling the truth, even if that truth was impossible to accept. "I'm listening, Your Imperial Highness." She smiled then, an expression so filled with joy and sorrow that it took his breath away. "My name is Saralyn," she said. And once upon a time, in another life, you loved me enough to die for me. The diplomatic crisis began within hours of Princess Sarah Lynn's dramatic reaction to Ambassador Hayes. By morning, both human and Valdorian delegations were demanding explanations for what appeared to be either an unprecedented breach of protocol or evidence of hidden agendas that could derail the peace process entirely. Ambassador Hayes, Director Martinez, head of the human diplomatic mission, paced the secure conference room like a caged predator. "I need you to explain exactly what happened in that reception hall." Jonathan sat across from a panel of senior diplomats, intelligence officers, and cultural specialists, all trying to understand how a routine introduction had become a potential international incident. "I honestly don't know, Director. I followed proper protocol, made the standard diplomatic introduction, and Princess Sarah Lynn reacted as if she recognized me." "Recognized you how?" "She claimed we'd met before. In another life." The word sounded even more absurd when spoken aloud in the sterile environment of the diplomatic facility. Commander Zhang, the mission's security chief, leaned forward. "Ambassador, do you have any undisclosed prior contact with Valdorian civilization? Any family history, personal connections, or classified operations that might explain her reaction?" "None whatsoever. My background checks are comprehensive. This is my first assignment involving the Valdorians." "Then we're dealing with either a psychological episode on the part of their heir apparent, or some form of manipulation designed to compromise our negotiating position." Dr. Sarah Kim, the mission's xenopsychologist, spoke up from her position at the end of the table. "Director, if I may, the Valdorians have documented psychic abilities and genetic memory capabilities that we don't fully understand. What we're seeing might not be manipulation or breakdown, but a genuine phenomenon according to their biology." "Explain." "Valdorian genetic memory is passed down through bloodlines, allowing individuals to access experiences from their ancestors. In rare cases, this can manifest as spontaneous recall of past events that feel like personal memories." Director Martinez stopped pacing. "Are you suggesting that Princess Sarah Lynn is remembering encounters between her ancestors and humans?" "It's possible. Though the intensity of her reaction suggests something more significant than distant ancestral memory." Meanwhile, in the crystal chambers of the Valdorian palace, Princess Sarah Lynn was undergoing her own intensive examination. High Sage Veltaran, along with the Empire's most skilled psychic healers, worked to understand the unprecedented awakening she had experienced. "The memories are not ancestral," Veltaran reported to the assembled council of advisors. "They are personal, direct, and span multiple incarnations across several centuries." Lord Commander Thex Allen, head of Imperial Security, expressed the concern weighing on everyone's minds. "Personal memories of incarnations? You're describing soul-level recall across multiple lifetimes." "That's exactly what I'm describing. Such phenomena are theoretical at best. There are no documented cases of verified reincarnation memory among our people." "There are now," Princess Sarah Lynn said, entering the chamber with the kind of composure that suggested she had reached important decisions during her night of contemplation. "I remember him, Veltaran. Not as ancestor remembering descendant, but as soul recognizing soul." "Your Imperial Highness," Thex Allen said carefully, "the political implications of such claims are secondary to their truth," she interrupted. "I remember Jonathan Hayes across multiple lifetimes. I remember loving him, losing him, and finding him again in different incarnations. Each time, we've been drawn together during crucial moments in the relationship between our species." Veltaran pulled up holographic displays showing historical records spanning millennia. "If what you're experiencing is genuine soul memory, then we should find evidence of these previous encounters in our archives." What they discovered over the following hours sent shockwaves through the Valdorian leadership. Buried in ancient records were accounts of human Valdorian contact dating back centuries before official first contact. Stories that had been dismissed as mythology or symbolic literature now revealed startling parallels to Princess Sarah Lynn's awakened memories. "Here," she said, pointing to a record from 300 years prior. Admiral Sarah Lynn of the Crystal Fleet and human envoy Marcus Hayes, lost together when their diplomatic vessel was destroyed in the Nebula Wars. Veltarun cross-referenced the records with growing amazement. The names, the faces in the preserved images, even the circumstances, they match your descriptions perfectly. And here, Princess Sarah Lynn continued, accessing older archives. Scholar Sarah Lynn and human philosopher Jonathan Reyes, executed together for treasonous advocacy of interspecies cooperation during the isolation period. Your Imperial Highness, Thex Allen said, his voice carrying notes of awe and concern, if these records are accurate, then you and this human have been finding each other across centuries. And each time, we've been separated by forces larger than ourselves. War, politics, species prejudice, something has always intervened to prevent our connection from achieving its full potential. The investigation continued as both delegations tried to understand the impossible situation that had developed. Dar. Kim, granted access to Valdorian historical archives through unprecedented diplomatic cooperation, worked with Veltarun to trace the pattern that Princess Sarah Lynn's memories revealed. The cyclical nature is remarkable, Dr. Kim reported to Director Martinez. If these records are accurate, we're seeing evidence of the same two souls incarnating repeatedly across multiple lifetimes, always during periods of crucial human-Valdorian interaction. And each incarnation ended in tragedy, Director Martinez observed, studying the compiled evidence. Death in battle, political assassination, exile, execution, every reunion was followed by forced separation. Which raises the question, Dr. Kim said quietly, of what makes this lifetime different. That afternoon, Princess Sarah Lynn made an unprecedented request. She wanted to meet privately with Jonathan, not as diplomat to diplomat, but as someone trying to understand impossible memories that felt more real than her current life. They met in the palace's memorial garden, a space designed for quiet contemplation away from the political pressures of formal diplomacy. Jonathan arrived uncertain of what to expect, while Princess Sarah Lynn came armed with historical records and a desperate need to make him understand something that defied rational explanation. Jonathan, she said, using his first name for the first time, I need you to listen with an open mind to something that will sound like madness. I'm listening. She began with the earliest memory she could access, a lifetime where she had been a young scholar and he a human philosopher, both advocating for peaceful coexistence between their species during a period when such ideas were considered treasonous. She described their work together, their growing love, and their eventual execution for refusing to abandon their beliefs about interspecies cooperation. We died holding hands, she said quietly. Promising each other that death couldn't separate souls meant to be together. Jonathan found himself listening with growing unease, not because he thought she was lying, but because her descriptions triggered emotional responses he couldn't explain. When she spoke of their execution, he felt grief that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than empathy. Your Imperial Highness. Sarah Lynn. Just Sarah Lynn. In private, we've never been anything but equals. She continued with other lifetimes, their incarnations as military officers during ancient wars, as diplomats during failed peace attempts, as researchers working to bridge the gap between their civilizations. Each story ended in separation, death, or circumstances that prevented their work from reaching fruition. But we kept finding each other, she said. Century after century, lifetime after lifetime, our souls drawn together during moments when our species needed bridges built between them. Sarah Lynn, Jonathan said carefully, what you're describing, it's impossible according to everything humans understand about life and death. Is it? How else do you explain the way you felt when you first saw me? The sense of familiarity that you can't shake. The feeling that this conversation is one we've had before. Jonathan paused, because she was right. From the moment he'd looked into her eyes, he'd felt a connection that went beyond diplomatic courtesy or even personal attraction. There was something in her presence that called to something in him, a recognition that operated below the level of conscious thought. Even if what you're saying is true, he said slowly, what does it mean for us now? For the negotiations? Sarah Lynn stood and moved to a crystal fountain that reflected the binary sunset in patterns of liquid light. It means we have a choice, Jonathan. We can let history repeat itself. Allow politics and prejudice to separate us again, let our species continue their cycle of conflict and mistrust. Or we can break the pattern. How? She turned to face him, her violet eyes holding depths that seemed to span centuries. By choosing each other this time. By refusing to let external forces tear apart what our souls have spent lifetimes trying to preserve. Jonathan looked at this remarkable woman, alien princess, potential enemy, and according to her memories, his eternal companion across multiple lifetimes. The logical part of his mind insisted that everything she was saying was impossible. But something deeper, something that felt like truth carved into his bones, whispered that she was right. If we try this, he said quietly, if we choose to explore this connection, it will change everything. The negotiations, our species' relationship, both our lives. Yes, Sarah Lynn agreed. But perhaps it's time for everything to change. As they stood together in the memorial garden, surrounded by monuments to Valdorian heroes who had died for causes they believed in, Jonathan felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. He could maintain diplomatic distance, complete his mission according to protocol, and return to Earth with his duty accomplished and his life unchanged. Or he could step into the impossible, trust in memories that weren't his own, and risk everything for the chance to finally break a cycle that had persisted across centuries. Looking into Sarah Lynn's eyes, those eyes that had somehow recognized him across the impossible distance between lives, Jonathan made his choice. The decision to explore their connection transformed both the personal dynamic between Jonathan and Sarah Lynn and the entire structure of the diplomatic negotiations. What had begun as routine treaty discussions became something unprecedented, an attempt to heal wounds that spanned centuries and break patterns that had kept two civilizations locked in mistrust. Show me, Jonathan said that first evening in the memorial garden. If these memories are real, help me access them. Sarah Lynn moved closer, her luminescent skin pulsing with gentle light that seemed to respond to her emotional state. Valdorian memory techniques can sometimes unlock dormant recall in other species. But the process is intimate. It requires complete mental openness. What does that mean? It means I'll need to form a psychic connection with you. Share my memories directly while helping you access whatever soul-level recall you might possess. Jonathan understood the implications. Psychic contact between species was considered either deeply personal or potentially dangerous, depending on the circumstances. For a human diplomat to allow mental contact with the Valdorian heir would be unprecedented. The risk, he said, is that you'll see everything. Not just the lifetime memories, but who I am beneath the royal protocols and diplomatic facades. All of it, my fears, my hopes, my certainty that finding you again is the most important thing that's ever happened to me. She extended her hand, palm up, in invitation. And I'll see you the same way. No barriers, no pretense, just truth. Jonathan looked at her outstretched hand, understanding that accepting it would change everything about his life and mission. Then he placed his palm against hers. The contact was electric, not painful, but overwhelming in its intensity. Sarah Lynn's memories flooded through him like a river breaking through a dam, carrying with them emotions and experiences that felt both foreign and intimately familiar. He remembered himself as Marcus Hayes, a human admiral working secretly with Sarah Lynn to prevent a war that their government seemed determined to fight. He remembered the desperate love they'd shared even as political forces aligned against them, the way they'd died together when their peace mission was sabotaged by those who profited from conflict. The memories shifted. Now he was Jonathan Reyes, a philosopher during the Valdorian isolation period, meeting scholar Sarah Lynn in hidden libraries where they developed theories about interspecies cooperation that their societies considered heretical. He remembered/felt their capture, their trial, their execution for the crime of believing that different species could live in harmony. More lifetimes flashed past. A trader and a diplomat, a scientist and a researcher, a soldier and a healer, always drawn together during crucial moments, always working toward the same goal of building bridges between their peoples, always separated by forces that seemed determined to keep their civilizations apart. Do you see? Sarah Lynn whispered, her voice reaching him across the psychic connection. We've been trying to solve the same problem for centuries. But as the memories continued to flow, Jonathan began to notice something that chilled him. The separations weren't random, they followed patterns that suggested deliberate intervention. Wars that erupted just as peace seemed possible, political scandals that destroyed their credibility, accidents that claimed their lives at crucial moments. Someone's been orchestrating this, he said, the realization carrying horrifying implications. Our separations aren't coincidental, they're planned. Through their shared connection, Sarah Lynn felt his understanding crystallize. You see it too. The pattern within the pattern. Who would do this? And why? I don't know. But I intend to find out. Over the following days, as formal negotiations continued under the watchful eyes of both delegations, Jonathan and Sarah Lynn began their own private investigation. Using Valdorian historical archives and newly accessible human records, they traced the pattern of interventions that had disrupted their connection across multiple lifetimes. Here, Sarah Lynn pointed to records from the Nebula Wars. Admiral Hayes and Admiral Sarah Lynn were scheduled to sign a preliminary peace treaty. But their diplomatic vessel was destroyed by what the reports called unknown assailants. Jonathan studied the tactical analysis. The attack pattern doesn't match any known human or Valdorian weapons of that period. Someone else was involved. And here, she continued, accessing records from their incarnation as philosophers. Their execution was ordered by a joint tribunal that included judges from both species, judges who had never worked together before and never did again. Manipulation from outside both governments. The investigation revealed a disturbing pattern. Across centuries, a shadowy organization had been operating to maintain conflict between human and Valdorian civilizations by eliminating those who might unite them. The group seemed to have access to both societies, advanced technology, and the patience to work across multiple generations. They call themselves the Eternal Schism, Sarah Lynn discovered in deeply buried Valdorian archives. Their philosophy is that interspecies conflict drives evolution and progress, while cooperation leads to stagnation. And we're their greatest threat, Jonathan realized. Two souls who keep finding each other, keep working toward peace, keep refusing to accept that our species have to be enemies. This lifetime, they're being more subtle. No direct assassinations or obvious sabotage, just political pressure designed to keep us apart. As if summoned by their discovery, the pressure began almost immediately. Conservative factions in both governments started raising concerns about the unprecedented personal interaction between the negotiating parties. Human officials questioned Jonathan's objectivity, while Valdorian nobles worried about their princess's involvement with an alien diplomat. Ambassador Hayes, Director Martinez called him into a private meeting. There are concerns about your friendship with Princess Sarah Lynn. Some are suggesting that you're being manipulated. Director, what Princess Sarah Lynn and I have discovered has implications far beyond personal relationship. We're dealing with evidence of systematic interference in human Valdorian relations spanning centuries. Evidence that consists of subjective memories and questionable historical interpretation. Evidence that explains why every attempt at lasting peace between our species has failed. Someone has been working to keep us in conflict. Meanwhile, Sarah Lynn faced similar pressure from the Valdorian court. Lord Commander Thexallen expressed the concerns that many nobles shared. Your Imperial Highness, your involvement with the human diplomat is being viewed as compromise of your position. My involvement with Ambassador Hayes has revealed threats to our empire that go far beyond current treaty negotiations. Threats based on claimed soul memories and ancient archives that could be interpreted many ways. Threats based on documented pattern of interference that explains centuries of failed diplomacy. But the political pressure was only the beginning. As Jonathan and Sarah Lynn continued their investigation, they began experiencing more direct opposition. Their private meetings were interrupted by sudden diplomatic emergencies, their research access was restricted due to security concerns, and both faced increasing isolation from their own delegations. They're trying to separate us again, Sarah Lynn observed during one of their increasingly rare private moments. Different methods than previous lifetimes, but the same goal. The question is whether we're strong enough to resist it this time. We have advantages our previous incarnations didn't have. We know what we're fighting against, we have documentation of the pattern, and most importantly, we remember each other. Their investigation reached a crucial breakthrough when they discovered that several key figures in both delegations had connections to organizations that could be fronts for the Eternal Schism. Financial records, communication patterns, and policy positions all suggested coordinated effort to undermine the peace process. Director Martinez, Jonathan presented his findings to the human leadership. I believe our delegation has been infiltrated by agents working to prevent successful negotiations. That's a serious accusation, Ambassador. It's a serious situation. The evidence suggests that opposition to the treaty isn't coming from legitimate policy differences, but from external manipulation designed to maintain conflict between our species. And your source for this evidence? Jonathan met the director's skeptical gaze directly. Princess Sarah Lynn and I have uncovered historical patterns that reveal systematic interference in human Valdorian relations. Someone has been working for centuries to keep our civilizations in conflict. Ambassador, you're asking me to believe in conspiracy theories based on alleged psychic memories and ancient historical records that could be interpreted dozens of ways. I'm asking you to look at the evidence objectively and consider that the resistance to peace might not be coming from where you think it's coming from. Director Martinez studied the compiled data, financial trails, communication intercepts, and historical parallels that painted a disturbing picture of outside manipulation. Even if this is accurate, the political reality is that your personal relationship with Princess Sarah Lynn is undermining your credibility with both governments. Then we need to separate the investigation from the personal relationship. Can you do that? Jonathan thought about the psychic connection he shared with Sarah Lynn, the memories that spanned lifetimes, the certainty that their souls had found each other again across impossible odds. No. They're connected. The personal relationship is what allows us to see the larger pattern. Then you may have to choose between your mission and your feelings. That evening, Jonathan met Sarah Lynn in the Crystal Gardens, both of them aware that their time was running out. Political pressure from both sides was mounting, and the Eternal Schism's subtle manipulations were beginning to achieve their desired effect. They're going to separate us, Sarah Lynn said, her luminescent skin dimmed with sorrow. My advisors are recommending that I withdraw from direct participation in the negotiations. And my superiors are suggesting that I've been compromised by personal involvement. They stood together in the garden where they'd first shared memories, watching the binary sunset paint the crystal walls with patterns of light that seemed to echo their own complex relationship. This is how it always ends, Sarah Lynn said quietly. External forces finding ways to drive us apart just when we're closest to achieving something lasting. Not this time, Jonathan said with sudden determination. We're not going to let them win again. What can we do differently? The pattern has held for centuries. The pattern held because our previous incarnations didn't know it existed. We do. We can choose to break it. How? Jonathan took her hands, feeling the electric connection that had sparked between them from their first meeting. By refusing to play by their rules. By making our relationship and our mission the same thing. Jonathan. Sarah Lynn, what if the personal connection isn't a complication to the peace process? What if it's the solution? What if two people choosing to love each other across species barriers is exactly what breaks the cycle of conflict? She stared at him, understanding dawning in her violet eyes. A royal interspecies marriage. The ultimate symbol of cooperation between our civilizations. And the one thing the Eternal Schism has spent centuries preventing. The idea was audacious, unprecedented, and politically explosive. But as they considered it, both realized it might be their only chance to break free from the pattern that had trapped them across multiple lifetimes. It would change everything, Sarah Lynn said. Not just for us, but for both our peoples. That's exactly why we have to do it. They spent the night planning not just a personal future, but a political strategy that would use their connection as a bridge between civilizations rather than a liability to be managed. By morning, they had decided to take the most dangerous step of their current incarnation, making their relationship public and challenging both governments to choose between ancient prejudices and unprecedented opportunity. The announcement sent shockwaves through both delegations and beyond. But for the first time in centuries, Jonathan and Sarah Lynn were fighting back against the forces that sought to keep them apart, armed with knowledge, determination, and the power of a love that had literally transcended death itself. The announcement of Princess Sarah Lynn and Ambassador Jonathan Hayes' intention to formally unite in marriage sent shockwaves through galactic civilization that reached far beyond the immediate diplomatic implications. For the first time in recorded history, a member of Valdorian royalty was proposing to bond with a human, creating political tremors that the eternal schism could no longer ignore through subtle manipulation. "This changes everything," Director Martinez told the Emergency Assembly of Human Leadership. An interspecies royal marriage would create legal and political precedents that could reshape galactic civilization. "Exactly why it cannot be allowed to proceed," came a voice from the back of the chamber. Jonathan and Sarah Lynn, monitoring the proceedings through diplomatic channels, watched as Counselor Williams, a member of the human delegation they'd identified as a probable schism agent, stepped forward. "The risks to human autonomy are enormous," Williams continued. "Genetic mixing, cultural contamination, political subordination to alien authority structures." Or, interrupted Dr. Kim, "the beginning of true interspecies cooperation based on mutual respect rather than fear." The debate that followed revealed the fault lines that had been carefully maintained for centuries. On one side, those who saw interspecies cooperation as dangerous dilution of species purity. On the other, those who recognized it as the next step in galactic evolution. Meanwhile, in the Valdorian Council chambers, a similar battle was unfolding. Lord Commander Thex Allen presented the conservative position, "Your Imperial Highness, the bloodline purity that has maintained our psychic abilities for millennia could be compromised by human genetic integration." "Could be enhanced," countered High Sage Veltaran, who had become one of their strongest supporters after witnessing the evidence of the Eternal Schism's manipulation. "Human neural plasticity might complement our psychic capabilities in ways we've never explored." But the real opposition came from deeper sources. As Jonathan and Sarah Lynn had predicted, their public announcement triggered responses from the shadow organization that had spent centuries keeping their species apart. The first attempt was a classic schism operation, a coordinated media campaign questioning Jonathan's motivations and suggesting that he was either a spy using romance for intelligence gathering or a psychologically unstable individual falling victim to alien mental manipulation. Ambassador Hayes has shown signs of compromised judgment since his arrival, Counselor Williams announced to human news networks. His claims about ancient conspiracies and soul memories suggest possible psychological breakdown or alien psychic influence. Simultaneously, Valdorian traditionalists received carefully planted information suggesting that Princess Sarah Lynn's apparent memories were artificial implants designed to make her vulnerable to human exploitation. "The timing is suspicious," declared Noble Kethvara during a public broadcast. These so-called memories surface only after extended contact with human diplomatic personnel. But Jonathan and Sarah Lynn had prepared for this response. Their investigation into the Eternal Schism had produced evidence that went far beyond personal memories, financial records, communication intercepts, and historical analysis that painted a clear picture of systematic manipulation. "Citizens of Earth," Jonathan addressed his home planet via subspace transmission, "I ask you to examine the evidence rather than accept the assertions of those who profit from keeping our species in conflict." He presented the documentation they'd compiled. Records showing how previous peace initiatives had been sabotaged, financial trails connecting apparent opponents on both sides to the same shadow organizations, and communication patterns that revealed coordinated efforts to maintain mistrust between civilizations. For centuries, someone has been working to ensure that humans and Valdorians remain enemies. The question is, who benefits from perpetual conflict? Princess Sarah Lynn made similar presentations to the Valdorian Empire, using her royal authority to demand access to the deepest historical archives. What she revealed shocked even the most conservative nobles. "Behold the true history of human Valdorian relations," she announced to the Imperial Council, displaying records that had been buried for generations. "Every war, every failed negotiation, every escalation of hostility, all can be traced to manipulation by the same shadow organization." The evidence was overwhelming, but the Eternal Schism's response was swift and decisive. If subtle manipulation wouldn't work, they were prepared to use more direct methods. The assassination attempt came during a joint cultural ceremony that Jonathan and Sarah Lynn had organized to demonstrate interspecies cooperation. As they stood together on the palace balcony, addressing a crowd of thousands from both civilizations, weapons fire erupted from multiple locations. Jonathan's military training saved them both. He recognized the attack pattern and pulled Sarah Lynn to safety just as energy bolts scorched the air where they'd been standing. Security forces from both species worked together to neutralize the threat, but the message was clear: the Eternal Schism was done with subtlety. "They've revealed themselves," Sarah Lynn said as they sheltered in the palace's secure chambers. "Direct violence means they're desperate. Or confident that they can blame the attack on extremists from either side." But the assassination attempt had an unexpected effect. Instead of driving the two sides apart, it united them against a common threat. Human and Valdorian security forces had worked seamlessly together to protect their leaders, demonstrating the kind of cooperation that both civilizations could achieve when faced with external danger. "The attack patterns don't match any known human or Valdorian weapons," reported Commander Zhang after analyzing the evidence. "We're dealing with technology that's more advanced than either of our civilizations possesses." Which raises disturbing questions about the Eternal Schism's true nature and resources, added Lord Commander Thexalon. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of the conspiracy they were facing. The Eternal Schism wasn't just a philosophical organization. It was a technologically advanced shadow civilization that had been manipulating galactic politics for millennia, using conflict between species to harvest resources, test weapons, and maintain control over the direction of civilization development. "They're not from either of our species," Dr. Kim realized as they analyzed captured technology. "This is third-party manipulation on a scale we never imagined." "A parasitic civilization," High Sage Veltaran concluded grimly. "One that feeds on conflict between other species." The revelation reframed everything. The resistance to Jonathan and Sarah Lynn's union wasn't based on legitimate cultural concerns. It was part of a systematic effort to maintain the conditions that allowed a shadow civilization to manipulate and exploit other species. "This is why our souls kept finding each other," Sarah Lynn realized during one of their planning sessions. "We represent the greatest threat to their system. Proof that species can choose cooperation over conflict. And this time, we have something they've never faced before. Which is knowledge. Previous incarnations of us fought against symptoms, the wars, the prejudices, the political opposition. Now we're fighting against the source." The final confrontation came when Jonathan and Sarah Lynn chose to proceed with their bonding ceremony despite continued threats and political opposition. The wedding itself became a statement of defiance against forces that had spent centuries keeping their species apart. Representatives from dozens of civilizations attended, many experiencing their first exposure to successful human-Valdorian cooperation. The ceremony blended traditions from both cultures, creating something entirely new, a symbol of what became possible when different peoples chose to build bridges rather than walls. But the real victory came afterward, as the evidence they'd compiled led to the exposure of Eternal Schism operations throughout known space. Other species came forward with their own experiences of manipulation and sabotage, revealing a pattern of interference that had shaped galactic history for millennia. The marriage was never the end goal, Jonathan realized as they stood together in their palace chambers, now husband and wife, watching as their investigation sparked galactic reforms. It was the catalyst. The catalyst for what? For choosing cooperation over manipulation. For refusing to let outside forces define our relationships with each other. Sarah Lynn moved to the great window that looked out over their capital city, where humans and Valdorians now worked side by side on projects that would have been impossible just months before. Do you think we've finally broken the cycle? Jonathan joined her at the window, taking her hand as they watched the evidence of their success. I think we've done something better. We've shown other people how to break their own cycles. The transformation rippled outward from their personal choice to love across species barriers. Trade agreements became partnership programs, military alliances became cultural exchanges, and the fear-based policies that had dominated galactic civilization for centuries gave way to cooperation-based approaches that created unprecedented prosperity and peace. The eternal schism operated by keeping species isolated and suspicious of each other, Sarah Lynn observed as they reviewed reports of similar breakthroughs happening throughout known space. Once species started working together, their manipulation became impossible to maintain. And it all started with two people choosing to trust impossible memories and fight for a love that had survived across lifetimes. Years later, as they watched their own children play with friends from a dozen different species, Jonathan and Sarah Lynn understood that they had achieved something their previous incarnations had only dreamed of, lasting change that extended far beyond their personal relationship. Do you think we'll find each other again in future lifetimes? Sarah Lynn asked one evening as they walked through gardens that now grew with plants from hundreds of worlds. I think, Jonathan replied, that this time we've built something so strong that it will outlast any single lifetime. We've created a template for cooperation that will keep working long after we're gone. Their story became legend throughout the galaxy, proof that some connections truly do transcend time, space, and the artificial barriers created by those who profit from keeping people apart. The cycle of separation and loss that had persisted across centuries was finally broken, replaced by a legacy of love that taught entire civilizations how to choose unity over division. And in gardens where alien flowers bloomed beside Earth roses, where human children learned Valdorian songs and Valdorian youth studied human philosophy, the impossible had become inevitable, a galaxy where differences were celebrated rather than feared, where love was stronger than prejudice, and where two souls who had spent lifetimes searching for each other had finally come home.